Welcome to 5 and 5 from the One Stop Co-op Shop, where I discuss 5 key elements of a game in about 5 minutes. I'm Michael Kelly, and today I'm looking at Resident Evil 3, the board game from Steam Forge. This is a 1 to 4 player campaign-based dungeon crawler, basically set in the Resident Evil universe. And a disclaimer that I was sent a review copy of this one. I'm a huge Resident Evil fan going way back, and I've recently been playing the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake quite a bit. So does this give the feel of the video game? Let's find out and get to the list. First, for number 5, I'm looking at the heroes you can play, and this one is a full-on con. You have 4 characters in the game, and one of the expansions brings a few more, but they are very similar to each other. Well, I should say that 3 of them are similar to each other. Jill is actually useful. The rest have very situational powers that barely come into play, so you don't feel that special when you play them. But they start with basically the same equipment, and they don't really unlock things differently. They don't grow throughout the campaign in any way, except for finding new guns. And this is one of the things. There are a few that contribute to the game feeling like it'll have less replay once you play through the campaign once. The fact that you can't switch out your characters and feel like you're doing it different and new and cool things is definitely a knock against the game. My number 4 is a mix, and that's looking at player count and how the game kind of changes with it. And it's a mix because the game doesn't necessarily get better or worse at different player counts, but it feels very different. So some players might prefer the solo or the 2-player experience. Some people might like 3 or 4 player better, because at every player count your characters start separated in kind of 2 teams. So with 1 player you only kind of controlling one half of the board at first, whereas with 2 you're more split up, and then it kind of gets divided from there. And players take alternating turns, but zombies and enemies in the same place as them will activate after each player's turn, and each time a player does something like attack, all the zombies and enemies that are linked to where they are will get to activate. So when you have more players, 3 or 4, you have the exact same number of enemies. That's important to point out. The enemies do not scale at all. You have more ammo to fight them with, but they get more activations naturally. So it actually kind of balances out, but I feel like in 3 and 4 player games, it's more of an action game because you have more bullets to kill people, and you kind of need to because you can't just let them keep on attacking you for free on other players' turns. My number 3 is the campaign, and this one is a full-on pro, but with a few caveats. So the game has a whole bunch of scenarios. You see them laid out here. This is just in the base game, but you can play them sort of in whatever order you want. You will slowly unlock more advanced and challenging ones, but those are the ones that have the better items for you, new weapons and that kind of stuff. And as you play, you also add unlockable cards to the tension deck, so this becomes tougher. Similarly, the danger level in the game ticks up based on your choices, based on how long it takes you, based on winning or losing scenarios. But really my favorite part of the campaign, and it's very similar to the Resident Evil video games, is the management of your characters and your inventory, because you don't heal fully after each scenario. You don't get all of your big shiny weapons you've unlocked generally reloaded after each scenario. Now my caveat on all of this is that if you have a lot of luck on some scenarios, you can have a ton more equipment and you can keep the danger level low. Alternatively, if a few scenarios go really badly, things can get worse and worse. You can get into kind of a death spiral. So it's just something to be aware of with the campaign. And also, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have infinite replayability. The scenarios do play out somewhat differently each time, but you are seeing the same stuff if you play another campaign. But my number 2, which is a mix, almost a pro for me, is the randomness, and that does add a lot of replayability to the game. So first of all, generally speaking, every time you enter a new room, you're going to roll a die and spawn different enemies based on that. You've got the tension cards that I already mentioned. A lot of them are all clears, which will do nothing, but some of them can be absolutely devastating depending on the situation you're in, or they can do almost nothing depending on your situation. And then the dice, of course, are huge because you are spending precious ammo, and yeah, sometimes you roll like that and don't hurt anybody at all. Sometimes the item you're looking for in the scenario-specific deck is the first item you find, sometimes it's the last. Just trying to communicate that there is a ton of swinginess here. Now, the reason for me it's almost a pro is that this gives the scenarios their increased life. It gives them their increased variety. Different enemies popping up in different places, rooms being more or less dangerous when you play, finding items and weapons in different configurations, going for your ammo at different rates. I think all of that gives the game excitement and variety and choice, but it's also, like I said, extremely random and can be extremely swingy, so some players are going to hate that. And finally, my number 1, which is a full-on pro for me, is the tactical puzzle of the game, and this really comes down to the enemy reaction system. And this was in Resident Evil 2, I think it's going to be in Resident Evil 1 that they're doing as well, so they know it's a good thing. And the basic way it works is every enemy that is linked to you by open doors or archways gets to activate after your turn. So right now, these dogs will get to charge at me, but the zombie can't see me because I closed the door behind me, so he does nothing. And then usually your attacks won't kill people. Instead, they'll just push them to, again, tactical positions where you can try to lock them off. So a ton of the game, and this really goes into my love of the video game that I enjoy this so much. A ton of the game is really more about like getting people out of your way and managing the rooms and stuff so that they don't have a way to chase you instead of actually defeating them straight up because your ammo is so limited. So overall, I can recommend Resident Evil 3 to fans of the Resident Evil series. I think it does capture the feel of video game really, really well. Maybe the best out of any board game I've played, or like similar to Bloodborne, which I think also did a great job. Also, if you like really great tension in play and tough, like quick tactical choices with a lot of randomization. But on the other hand, you might want to avoid this one if you're really randomness averse. There's so much dice rolling in it. Also, if you're looking for things like unique character powers, there's really not that much variety here. And I'm not sure if you'll want to play through the campaign more than once or maybe twice. And if you want to see the game in action, I had a playthrough from a day or two ago. You can check out the link up there. Good gaming, and I'll see you at the next stop.